Good afternoon and welcome to the Law and Crime Network. I'm Angelica Spanos. Thanks so much for joining us today. We have a big show and a lot to get to. All right, so again, these are a portion of the prosecution's closing arguments in the Hollywood Ripper trial. With me today to break all this down and talk on the Law and Crime Network is our own Gene Rossi, Law and Crime legal analyst. Gene, thanks for being here.
Good afternoon, Angelica.
So first off, before we get into the details of this trial, talk a little bit about your immediate reaction to the prosecution's closing arguments. This has been a trial we've been talking about here for months because it's been lasting a long time. And obviously a big trial as there are multiple murders here and what we are told to be a serial killer.
What struck me the most watching the opening, I think on Monday, and now just watching a little bit of the closing, is the prosecutors are not using fire and brimstone. They're not over the top. We watched a trial in Georgia Monday that was a little over the top in the closing. They are just sticking to the facts and doing it in a very somber and deliberate way. And the reason is simple. The facts are so egregious. They're so outrageous and disgusting and evil that you really don't have to have fire and brimstone. And I like that approach very much.
All right, Gene, thanks. Let's go on and listen to more of these closing arguments. The prosecution saying that all of these things are pointing to Michael Gargiulo. He talks about how these were bold moves. They came at night, near, inside or outside all of these women's home. And they talk about a man who had knowledge of these areas, the surrounding neighborhoods, and the patterns of the victims. And they also describe him as a killer who had the knowledge how to kill, and not only how to kill, but how to cover it all up. I think a big thing here was how the prosecution called him a killer, and just by using that language, Gene, I think that was really effective in that delivery.
Oh, I got to tell you, this is what I love about analyzing trials. There are 100 ways to try a case, and for Garrett Dameron, I hope I pronounced his last name right, this is the perfect approach for him. He is himself. He's not trying to be some other attorney. And he grabbed onto that killer phrase, and he brought up a good point. The killer, the defendant, tried to have the perfect crime, but he couldn't get over one thing, the similarities. And that has nothing to do with fingerprints, DNA, eyewitness, video, recordings. The similarities of the crime were a major downfall for him. That's an excellent way to approach the closing.
Yeah, and on that, so he's basically saying that this guy has an MO, and that's what's bringing all these together?
Yes, MO. And an MO doesn't have DNA. An MO doesn't leave a fingerprint. It doesn't have an eyewitness, but it speaks volumes. And that gets into how powerful circumstantial evidence can be. You know, direct as an eyewitness. I see you kill somebody, not you, but I see somebody kill somebody. But circumstantial is a little different, and facts that lead to a conclusion. And the MO is definitely great circumstantial evidence.
And you being a defense attorney, tell us a little bit about what we can expect from the defense here, because when you're sitting in this courtroom and listening to this as the defense, you've got to be a little worried, huh?
Oh, I'm now a defense attorney after almost 30 years with DOJ as a federal prosecutor. I would be a little worried because, you know, I understand there's one victim that has DNA of his under her fingernails. That's going to be a tough one. But what you have to do is you have to embrace that MO and say, listen, it's great they're talking about circumstantial evidence. Great they're talking about similarities. But at the end of the day, there's still no video. There's no eyewitness. So you attack their strength by saying there's reasonable doubt because there is no eyewitness. There is no DNA except for the fingernails.
Right, and that's interesting too, because as you said, if that evidence is lacking at any point, the prosecution can say, hey, he knew how to cover it up. He was a pro at hiding these sort of things. So that only maybe might help them. I want to bring up a graphic that we have. This is a graphic that the prosecution made, and you see there's a bunch of arrows just pointing at the mugshot of Gargiulo there. What do you think of this? It's kind of hilarious, actually.
Here's the thing. Angelica, I'm not a big PowerPoint guy, okay? My PowerPoint are my hands, okay? I'm Italian. This is my PowerPoint. So I don't need fancy slides. You have to be careful when you're presenting a case for the government on a very serious case, tragic. You got to be careful. You don't want to cross that line in almost ridiculousness. And here's the thing. If I were a defense attorney, when I get up there, I would put that slide up there and talk about how this is just a show. This is just this is a flash in a pan. Let's talk about the evidence. You can point all the arrows you want at my client, but there's no arrows that are direct evidence. This is all speculation. This is their theory. They can put all the arrows they want, but that is not evidence. That's how I would attack it.
Yeah, that seems like a good idea. It's a pretty interesting graphic there. All right, Gene, thank you. Right now, we're going to take a break on Law and Crime. When we come back, we'll continue to follow the Hollywood Ripper trial. All right, so again, more from the prosecution there. And Gene, you listened to him really highlighting how these crimes have all these similarities. He talks about the common characteristics between them. And then he goes on to talk a little bit about Gargiulo and say how, hey, he knew these women's physical attributes. He mentions all that in detail. What do you make of that?
I think he led with his chin a little bit on that, and I'll tell you why. If Gargiulo made comments about women that went beyond, hey, she's hot, I think she's attractive, I would definitely focus on that. But I got to tell you, as a defense attorney, maybe the way I grew up, if you were to indict somebody and charge somebody, a man, because they're at a party and they're looking at a woman whom they think is hot, then there are about 500,000 men in America today that need to be indicted. So you got to be careful on putting a broad brush. Big deal. He was attracted to attractive women. Joined the club. But what he needs to do is say, he didn't just say, oh, so-and-so is hot looking, I like that style. He needs to get to the extra, because there are some comments that Gargiulo said that went beyond just saying, hey, she's hot, I like her looks, things like that. So you got to be careful. And if I were a defense attorney, I'd make them eat those words.
All right, we'll see what happens with that. Let's go on to see what else the prosecution says. All right, so we saw some more PowerPoint images there. Gene, you'll have to tell me what you think of these ones. But before we get to that, he describes how this is Gargiulo's hunting ground. He says that you saw this area, you walked there, you know how he could get all this information, and he shows that again with that diagram with those labels on it. Do you think that was effective?
That was exceptional. I was a little hard on Mr. Dameron on the other thing. Okay, the attractive thing, but on this one, he hit pay dirt. He hit an oil well. Same person, same home, knowledge of how to get in and how to get out without leaving any evidence. And it was nearby. That is a great argument. I like that one a lot.
So he redeemed himself a little bit there for you.
Yeah, the other one, the attractive thing, my God. I don't want to go there any further, okay? It just didn't impress me.
All right, well, we have another clip we want to play for you. Let's listen to this one. All right, so the prosecution, again, referencing that diagram. And in that diagram, he's showing the 4 locations from these 4 alleged victims. And one of these, he is including the woman from Chicago. And that case is not even included in this trial. That's going to happen separately after this one wraps up. That's a separate trial for Gargiulo. But Gene, since he's bringing that in here and he's setting up all 4 of these, is that interesting to do that? Is that usual?
Yes. Of course, you have Ashley, Trisha, and Maria. Those are the murders in
Hollywood. Right.
Hollywood, of course. Those are in the indictment. And then you got Chicago. Chicago's what they call other crime evidence to show motive, plan, opportunity, intent. So they're using that to show, you know what? He also did this in Chicago. It's not before you in the indictment, but you can use that to determine whether these 3 in Hollywood are the ones committed by him, and Michelle is the one who survived. And I assume she's going to testify at trial. That could be very powerful.
Yeah, and I think it's really, helping his case by having that fourth thing, because first of all, visually it looks great to have that diagram with the 4 squares. And I'm assuming if I'm a juror sitting there, that's going to be really easy for me to understand and ingest. So it's interesting that can kind of bolster him there.
Right. And the thing I like about what Mr. Dameron's doing is he's putting up these photos, which are excellent. They're not flashy, but his words are really explaining how the proximity to all these crimes alleged, how the proximity to these alleged crimes are very important, because it allowed the defendant to have an opportunity, means, motive, and opportunity, to have an opportunity to commit these alleged crimes.
Right, exactly. All right, and just to reiterate, the 4 crime scenes that he's showing, one is Trisha's from Chicago, and the other 3 are Ashley, Maria, and Michelle's, and those 3 were in Hollywood, just to clear that up there. Thanks, Gene. We're going to take a break right now on Law and Crime. When we come back, we'll continue to break this all down for you. Stay with us.